So I want to say a few words about the Buddha, Dharma, and activism. What I like to say is that we wouldn't know anything about Buddhism had not the Buddha been an activist. Mm. So from the moment he decided to stand up and to go and teach the Dharma, he was taking a very active stance. Could just sit under that tree or that sixth tree or that seventh tree, did after the Bodhi tree, a week under each of 7 trees, 49 days. Could have just remained there, blissed out, but chose not to. The Buddha said, there's suffering and there's the end of suffering. Oh, when he was 80. I've taught only 2 things in my life, suffering and the end of suffering. But he also enjoined his monks and nuns to go for it and to teach as well. So he was never, if you look at his life, never just a quietist, he never just, oh, this is blissful, this is groovy, this is cool. It was always something to help others. So I say from the moment he stood up, Buddhism was active. And the Buddha was like this until the end of his life, because at the end of his life, what does he say? Go forth, O monks, and surely we know there were nuns there. Oh, and teach the Dharma, that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end, for the welfare of the many. So I think now, add to that the fact that the Buddha also opened his Sangha in a time when it was very much not done. He allowed women to go forth. People of all castes, all 4 castes, and women. It was quite a radical institution for 6th century BC India. Very radical indeed. So some people want to see Dharma on one side and activism on the other. But I can't do that. Seems to me they always came together, and it certainly seems to me that they ought to come together. Oh, are we ready to get to this point yet? You have to tell me. Oh, okay. So, to tell you just a little about myself, I come from Birmingham, Alabama. I grew up where there were drinking fountains marked white and drinking fountains marked colored. Oh, and though I entered school in 1954, Brown v. Board of Education, which outlawed separate but equal, because separate is never equal. 11 years later when I graduated, segregation was still a fact in Alabama. And the Supreme Court of Alabama had gone through all sorts of maneuvers to make sure that integration did not become a fact, even though it was the law of the land. Oh, so while things were rough, kind of bad, we had secondhand things at school. I didn't know that public school meant that you got your supplies free. We didn't know that. My parents stood in lines that went around the block, so that they could buy secondhand books so that my sister and I, could study. Okay, but while there was that, there was also good things, like great black teachers, and a dual education that taught us not only American history, but African American history, not only English lit, but African American lit. And people I meet today who are African Americans, we recite a poem exactly the same way with the same gestures. It was so uniform, this dual education. And the best thing I want to mention is that when I was 15, a 10th grader, I marched with King. It was 1963. And many of the things I later learned in Buddhism, I had heard from Martin Luther King. And interdependence, compassion, these are truths that spur action. Like Thich Nhat Hanh says, once you see it, you have to act. This was part of my upbringing. This was how Buddhism settled in for me. This was how Buddhism was so, oh, wow, yeah, I recognize that. Finally, the thing is that Buddhism and activism go hand in hand for me. And I see the example of that from the time I hear the Buddha's teachings and watch the Buddha's life. it seems to be evident to me that the two go together.
Sitting the historical context, Dr. Willis, of how you grew with segregation, how did you not become pissed off enough to not find that deep spiritual journey, that it was just how did you manage to respond to your life rather than react to your life?
Oh. I was fortunate, I think, Lama's blessings even before I met Lamas, I think. I was apparently smart. School was a sort of refuge for me. Smarter than teachers. White superintendents would visit schools, and they would have us stand and answer something they'd asked. I heard a superintendent, I watched as my teacher in, I don't know, 5th grade, 6th grade, pleaded with me to answer the white superintendent's question. And I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to lose friends. You know how peer pressure. Didn't want to be, a teacher's pet. But finally I stood and I answered the question. And then, this is the pain that a black child experiences, the superintendent went into the principal and says, "Principal, I see you got a smart one in there." It was as though he was saying a smart pickaninny. It was. But school was important. And the King March, that was important. That was exhilarating, right? And I went to school, and it was, I think one of my long-standing questions or deep questions has been, how do human beings maintain humility on the one hand, but integrity and a sense of pride, good sense of pride on the other? I didn't want to be angry. I wanted to feel okay with who I was. I got scholarships. There was a cross burning because I was going north to school, not only to Ivy League school. Cross burning, It was not good to become conspicuous in the South that I grew up in. Mining camp where Klan leader lived. So I got these scholarships, and there was a cross burning. And I rode the bus to school to Ithaca, New York. Took a day and a half. Couldn't eat at the restaurants we passed until we got to Scranton, Pennsylvania. But once I was there in Cornell, I made friends. The friends were political, friends from Syosset, Long Island, who wanted to know, how is it? How is that segregation? How is that Jim Crow? How is it? And I was shy, I don't know you, that well, like. But one of those people is my dear friend, has remained friends from first year. At any rate, I started reading, as I always did. That was a refuge, and the Vietnam War was happening. That's the main thing. And so my friends were protesting the war. We had hunger strikes at Cornell. Trying to pick out parts of the story that might get to this point. So I read about, I was a philosophy, I went as a physics major, and I was a philosophy major. Then I read books on Buddhism, and because the Vietnam War was going on, when I discovered that most Vietnamese, some were Catholic, but most were Buddhist, then I started reading Buddhist texts. That resonated with me. And I said, these people are experiencing every day, napalm, they're experiencing cruelty and some of the things I know about. And so I wanted to see how it is that they coped. And I started reading the Buddhism. In those days, it was Alan Watts and it was D.T. Suzuki, and I read everything I could get my hands on. And I determined that one day I was going to go to the far reaches of Japan and meditate. All in black and austere, and I was just going to meditate. And I got a chance to go. My junior year was the second year of the college year in India that the Wisconsin program, Wisconsin University ran. I went on that program after some cajoling. And then I was in Benares because I was a philosophy major. They sent us to Benares. Social scientists went to Delhi. So there I was in, if you like that, do you? Well, it was just true. So there I was in Benares in a class with 7 Thai monks and the professor. But the professor liked Wittgenstein, was what I was majoring in, analytic philosophy. Oh, so we had good talks. But the Thai monks, they would just stand and they would say, Jan, we think you would like this book, and then drop it, and step back. Thai monks, right? But Benares was 7 kilometers outside of Sarnath. And once I found that out, I'd go to Sarnath, and that's where I met Tibetans. So meeting Tibetans my junior year transformed everything, because these were joyous people who had just suffered an historical trauma. I said, they can relate with me, and I can relate with them. And I like what they have. And they said, come on in. Hugged me up, and the next year I met Lama Yeshe. And so I think maybe Lama Yeshe had been reeling me in the whole time. I don't know. But it sure feels good. Long-winded little story, but